Have you ever thought it's not worth it? I'm just gonna let it go. I don't wanna make this awkward. But then you replay a situation or a conversation in your head for days. If this is you, then I get you, and I'm the same way too. You hate conflict and you're always trying to avoid it. Avoiding conflict doesn't create peace, it just creates resentment. It just means it's gonna happen again, and it doesn't solve anything. So even though it's tough and uncomfortable, conflict often makes a situation better. So today we're talking about why we avoid conflict and how to stop. Welcome to In Confidence, where what we share in confidence helps us grow in confidence. This season, we're taking real life problems that you've given to us and voted on, and we're giving you practical solutions that you can actually use. I'm calling this season Problem Solution, and today's problem that we're solving is conflict avoidance. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about why we avoid conflict, and I'm going to give you a couple of concepts on how you can stop it. But let's start off first with, I am someone who avoids conflict all the time. And during the pandemic, one of my best friends, Jane Park, incredible entrepreneur, she often says, we did not really become best friends until we had this epic fight in 2020. Our companies were making face masks together and shipping them out, and we had a huge disagreement. So it was a situation where I basically tried to avoid her phone call, and eventually we talked, and I just didn't want to talk to her because I was stressed and I was tired and I just didn't want to get into it. Plus, Jane is someone that I really care what she thinks about me. I want her to think that I'm awesome. And we basically spent 45 minutes on the phone in a tearful, knockdown, drag out, epic fight. And she often points that moment as that's the moment we became real friends. And I realized that I had been avoiding that conflict because I didn't trust myself enough. I didn't want her to think less of me. And I didn't trust her enough. I, for some reason, didn't know that she also wanted what was best for me, or she wanted what was best for both of us. And that feedback is a gift. And that if we just tackled the conflict head on, we would move forward the next morning, more clear-headed, more aligned, feeling better about each other. But I just avoided that phone call for hours until I couldn't avoid it any longer. And so I'm living proof that, one, we all avoid conflict, and I'm going to get into why. But also I'm living proof that when you do take it on and you have trust in yourself and you have trust in the other person, you get to a much better place. So let's start off with why we avoid conflict. Conflict avoidance is not weakness, it's intelligence, because at some point in our life, conflict didn't feel safe. Maybe it escalated, maybe it damaged a friendship, maybe it led to rejection. And so your brain actually learned avoiding this is a way to survive. It's a way to protect ourselves. And that wiring often sticks. So what protected you then may actually be limiting you now. And here's the neuroscience of conflict avoidance. When conflict shows up, your brain doesn't interpret it as a conversation. It actually interprets it as a threat. And it activates your amygdala, your brain's fear center. It's an alarm system that every single animal on the planet has. It's that part of your brain that controls flight, fight, or freeze. And we're going to introduce a new concept called fawn. Because, for example, you see a snake, you run away from it, you freeze, you try to fight it. And we're going to talk about fawn, which you can't do with a snake, but with humans you can. Your amygdala activates. And that amygdala does not distinguish between a tiger in the wild, your boss disagreeing with you, your best friend confronting you. Your nervous system goes into flight, fight, freeze, or a new concept called fawn. Conflict avoiders tend to fly away, freeze, or fawn. If you fly away, you ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist and hope it goes away. You freeze in terms of you just shut down, or you fawn, which is you appease to keep the peace. You just give in because you just don't want to fight it anymore. And here's what's important. When your amygdala is activated, your prefrontal cortex, that part that controls rational, strategic thinking, it goes offline. So when you say, I just couldn't say anything, or I just gave in, that's not because you're incapable. It's because your nervous system took over, and avoiding conflict reduces your immediate stress levels. It makes you feel protected. But what it also does is it increases your long-term stress, because unresolved tension also lingers in the body, and discomfort that you've avoided becomes resentment stored. So we avoid conflict because we're conditioned to. On top of the neuroscience, we're also taught to be agreeable, to be likable, don't rock the boat, and speaking up feels like a social risk. And also social rejection activates the same pain centers in our brain as physical pain. So oftentimes, in addition to the neuroscience of seeing conflict as a danger or a threat, we also see it as an opportunity to be rejected or not be liked. And what ends up happening is rejection literally hurts us. So of course we want to avoid the potential risk of being seen as not likable, or not being adored, or not being seen as compliant, or going along with the way things are done. And I call this that we just don't trust ourselves. So there's a neuroscience component of it, and there's an identity component of it. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to bring it up because this person's going to think less of me. So all of that makes sense, right? Which is, conflict seems like a threat, and I don't want to look bad in front of the other person or feel less than. And so there's a real cost to avoiding conflict, because over time it creates resentment, it creates distance, burnout, being overlooked. You say yes when you mean no. You stay silent when you disagree. You tolerate behavior that drains you, and then you feel unseen. Avoiding conflict is avoiding clarity. And I think when we are avoiding clarity, it means that we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust others, and we don't lead the way we want to lead. So today I want to talk about a reframe. I think the most important thing from a mindset standpoint is conflict requires us to trust ourselves, trust the other person, and think of the conflict not as aggression, but as an opportunity to make things better. And the intent there is information, not drama; alignment, not causing problems or rocking the boat; clarity, not giving in or being complacent. And I think that's an important reframe, is what's the intent of what you're doing. Oftentimes when I get into a fight with my boyfriend, he'll say, I know you're coming from a good place. I know you want us to be strong. I know you want our family to grow and be strong. I know that's why you're bringing this up. Not because you want to hurt me or make me feel worse off. You're doing it for these reasons. And when he gives me feedback, by the way, I oftentimes shrink and shrivel and get upset and think that he must think less of me. And now I have to trust myself enough to know when he tells me to close the door when I take the dog out for a walk, it's because he wants to sleep an extra hour, not because he thinks I'm a bad person. And so I think when you get to a place where conflict becomes conversation, you start to see real progress and solutions in life. I think the first time I've had a major conflict with any person I work with or am friends with or close to, it's always led to a deeper and stronger relationship. So I want you to reframe conflict as conversation, conflict as strengthening, something that if we get through this, when we get through this, we're actually going to come out the other end understanding each other better, growing together, and solving something together. That reframe is really critical. You're not avoiding it because it's going to hurt. You're going to step into it because it's going to make the situation better. So here's the practical way when you have to get into conflict with someone, or you feel yourself avoiding that conversation or that moment. By the way, one of my best friends since college, during the pandemic, we had a bit of a falling out. And now I know it was a total misunderstanding. I mean, everything could be misperceived in the pandemic. And she came back to New York. She had moved away from New York. She came back and we went for this long walk where she told me she was pregnant. This is very exciting for a woman in her 40s to be pregnant. And we cleared the air on so many things. And I thought to myself, wow, I've wasted a year of the pandemic being mad at you or being upset with you, and you being upset with me, when if we had just not avoided it, we would have been there for each other through some important life milestones, like me getting dumped by my boyfriend of 6 years and her getting pregnant. We missed out on that period of time. We're back together. And it's only because one of my girlfriends said, stop avoiding this person. You need to go have that conversation. So how did I do it? What is the practical solution for it? The first, before you're going to have this conversation, regulate yourself. Don't let your fear center take over. Don't let the amygdala be in the driver's seat. So here's a little tip. When you feel fear, or when you are upset, or when you feel conflict, your amygdala, that part of your brain that is the most primitive part that every animal has, is the first to show up at the party. It takes 10 seconds for your neocortex, the good part of your brain, to show up. This is why a parent always tells you to count to 10 before you say anything, because you might speak from a place of anger or fear. And so I like to say, before you're going to go into conflict, regulate yourself. Don't let the amygdala in. I do 757 breathing, which if you haven't already, I believe that's episode 2 of our podcast, around these 19 seconds will change your life. I do 757 breathing. I slow my nervous system down. And I actually have a conversation with my inner critic, because oftentimes when we're afraid of something, it's because our inner critic is in the driver's seat. So I always have a little moment for myself. Okay, worst case scenario. I bring this up and my inner critic will say, this person's going to hate you. They're going to scream at you, blah, 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 all the things. And I let my inner critic just have a moment. By the way, sometimes I'll call my bestie Jane and just say, I have to have this difficult conversation with this person. Can we just role play it? I'm going to give you the worst case scenario. And sometimes that's nice just to rehearse that. So I think there's a first step, which is just regulate before you have that conversation physically, but also let your inner critic's voice out. And then I want you to think about, okay, what's the best case scenario here? What's the best outcome for the situation? So when your body feels safe and your inner critic is at bay, your brain thinks clearly. The second thing, I want you to, in this moment of conflict with this other person, I want you to use a couple of elements of a structure. The first part is, I want you to express intent. Sometimes when someone expresses intention or intent, it often softens the other person's ears to listen and to absorb. So for example, my intent, hey, I want to bring something up. I want to clear the air because I care about you. And it was so, the fight I described with my best friend, Jane Park, at the beginning of this session, I want to tell you that she was very clear. Hey, I'm bringing this up because we are such close friends. If I didn't care, I would totally ignore you and ice you out and ghost you over time. And slowly our friendship would just erode. I care about our friendship. I care about you. I care about what we're doing. That's the only reason I'm bringing this up. And I think it's very important that you express intent, that we are in this together, that we're sharing the same values, we're sharing the same objective. Then the person doesn't feel attacked. It's sort of, we're not on opposite sides of this conflict. We're on the same side of the table trying to figure this out together. And I think that intent puts you on the same side of the table, not on the opposite sides of the table. Then I want you to use a structure which talks about observation, impact, and options to solve. So, hey, just from a fact-based standpoint, I observed this, and it's just a simple formula for feedback. I observed this happened. Here's the impact it had on me or others or the situation. Can we talk about some options on how to do this differently? It's neutral, it's clear, it's direct. So express intent. Hey, we want the same things here. I need to clear the air on something. Can I share with you something as how I saw it? Here's what it created in terms of impact, and here's what I want us to do going forward. In that process, engage in dialogue, have the conversation, make sure the other person understands. You need to listen for that person's reaction. They might get defensive. And by the way, when I had this fight with Jane, I definitely got defensive. And then I started crying, and then I realized something was my fault. And then I was apologizing and overdoing it. And I think in that moment I learned, and I'm still emotional thinking about this fight that we had. And it really was about wanting to do the right thing. And so we focused more on, here's what happened. Here's how we both misunderstood the impact of it. And here's what we would do going forward. I think the phrase, the next time this happens, I will ... becomes really important when you're trying to solve something when you're in conflict. The third thing I want you to try is micro conflicts. You know, one of the things about getting over conflict avoidance is you're actually building a muscle. So I always say you can't automatically get to a 15-pound dumbbell until you started with a 5-pound dumbbell. So I'm going to give you the 5-pound, maybe even the 2-pound dumbbell, which is practice micro conflict. Let's give your nervous system some mini reps so that you can try just thinking about conflict. But the other thing that this requires is you have to trust yourself. You have to trust yourself. Because when you trust yourself, you don't worry about if that other person is judging you or thinking less of you, or you won't be embarrassed by it. So I want you to practice micro conflict. I'm going to give you a really simple one. Correcting an order at the dinner table. Like, let's say you ordered something and the dish showed up, and usually you would fawn. You would just be like, okay, I'll just accept it. It's not perfect. It's not what By the way, your hard-earned money bought this meal. I want you to practice having that conversation, calling the server over and say, oh my gosh, intention, right? I hate making your life difficult. If you've been a server in the past, and I have been, I usually say, I have been in your position before, and I don't want to be that difficult customer. However, I'd love it if we could correct a few things on my entree. It would just make my evening, it would make everything better. And I really want to enjoy tonight. You know, not over explaining it, but I think using that moment not to be a difficult customer or have conflict, get what you want in a way that everyone feels better about the situation. So that's a good example of a micro conflict, I want to think. Maybe stating a preference. Maybe you're always the person who goes with the flow and quietly resents that you don't have any role in picking the movie or picking where you go to eat. Figure out a way to state a preference. It's not a conflict necessarily, but it's sort of voicing what you want and not being worried that you're going to be judged as not being easygoing. Again, this requires a level of self-trust where you get a chance to have your needs and preferences voiced. In fact, I have this one friend who's dating someone, and she goes, I never get to say what we get to do, but I don't want to rock the boat because I want him to keep liking me. And I told her, I said, then you're not in a real relationship if you don't get to have a voice. If you don't like the restaurant this person's picked, you should say, hey, could we go somewhere else? Here's 3 other places I like. You're in a relationship when you actually get to have a voice. Because I said, quietly, you will resent this over time. Or maybe your micro conflict is, hey, I see something a little differently. Do you mind if I share it? Because the more your brain experiences conflict without catastrophe, the less it perceives as a threat. And you are rewiring yourself. So I love this idea of micro conflict, a couple of places where you would have stayed silent or given in or appeased or just ignored it, making sure you advocate for yourself, trust yourself, and don't worry about how you're being seen or judged. You need to trust the other person, the other party, that they have your best interest in mind too. And if they don't, if they push back, then maybe that's your bigger question to think about if you want to be in this relationship or have this interaction, because the best relationships are the ones that can handle conflict. The fourth idea I want to give you is I want you to separate discomfort from danger. And this is something I personally have been working on, being okay with discomfort. Your body might react as if discomfort is danger, but most modern conflict is not life-threatening. And I think you can ask yourself, okay, is this uncomfortable or is this unsafe? And I think that question shifts everything, because if it's uncomfortable, maybe that's okay. Sometimes discomfort's okay. I like to think with a lot of people in my life, I tried to avoid that discomfort. And now I'm totally okay with some degree of it, as long as it doesn't get to a place of not being safe. So this is one area where I think you have to use your judgment in terms of that type of a conflict. But for the most part, the people you love in your life, they're going to love that you're not avoiding the conflict. All right. In closing, I'm going to give you a power move. For each episode this season, I want you to have one clear takeaway. So here's your power move this week. I want you to have one 5-minute clarifying conversation that you've been avoiding. Not a confrontation, not a one-sided speech. 5 minutes that starts with, I want to clear the air about something, or I want to clarify something with you. It would mean a lot if we could walk through something and talk about something. And I want you to do that, because once you do it, it changes everything. I'm going to give you a very micro conflict one that I did recently. My boyfriend and I moved in together in December. And I've never really lived with a boy. I'm not sure I'm equipped to, as a 46-year-old woman, I'm not sure I'm equipped to live with boys. But he moved in December. And we have very, very, very different views around cleanliness. And I'm a neat freak, basically. And I didn't want to rock the boat. We had a conversation about 2 weeks of him moving in. And I said, hey, I want us to be super happy. We live in a very small apartment in New York City. I said, I want us to be really happy here. Can we talk about a few things? And I'm happy to be flexible on them if there's things you really need. But there's a couple of things that I've observed, like leaving clothing in the living room. I'm a huge freak about that. I need clothing to be in a closet, a bureau, somewhere. And what that means for me, it just creates chaos, and my life is chaos. So I like to have certain spaces be really clean. What are some options? We ended up having this conversation, realized he did not have enough storage space in the apartment. So we created more shelf space, more bureau space, all of these things. But I was so nervous about it. And we had an incredibly productive and constructive conversation. It's still an ongoing battle, by the way. We still have very different living preferences, but we love each other and our intent is clear. So I believe we're getting stronger in the process of working through all of that. So your power move, have one 5-minute clarifying question. It might just be the step up you need in a relationship in your life. Before we close, I want to build on something that we've been doing this whole season, which is a GRAVITAS shoutout, because I think growth deserves to be seen, ownership deserves to be named, and the people doing the work deserve to be celebrated. So at the end of each episode, we're going to recognize someone, something who is leading with GRAVITAS. And today's shout out comes from my dear friend, Maggie Palmer. If you haven't listened to her episode on our podcast from a few seasons ago, she talks about how to get and negotiate the pay raise you want. So if you're looking for a raise, make sure you listen to her. She's the incredible founder of a company called Pep Talk Her. And we got a box sent to our office last week. And in it was something called a boomerang bite. Oh my goodness, it was the most delicious thing our team has ever had. Boomerang Bites are founded by Andrea Rizvi. It's a women-owned artisanal bakery based in New Jersey that hand bakes bite-sized Aussie recipes. No artificial preservatives or flavors. They donate at least 20% of their profits to educational causes such as Room to Read and Girls Right Now. And Maggie sent these bites to our office and said, I just want to thank you for supporting the work we do and being a friend. And please pass along the work that Andrea and her team are doing to someone else. So this is my form of passing it along. By the way, these bites are delicious. My favorite was the peanut butter chocolate one, coconut. I think we also had a jelly one, right, Claire? They were just so delicious. They went very quickly. I hope you loved this episode of In Confidence. I hope you're leaving this space stronger than when you entered it. Please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe it's someone that you are avoiding in a conflict and you're like, let's do this exercise together. Subscribe so you never miss a moment of inspiration. Please comment, leave a review, because reviews help us amplify our work and so more people see it. And until next time, In the words of my 9-year-old self, I see you, I value you, and I believe in you. This is In Confidence.